We are in the middle of this absolutely mind-blowing explosion in AI capability. But as these models get more and more powerful, we're staring down a huge question that's way bigger than just code and algorithms.
So, we've built these incredible systems that can do almost anything we ask. But how do we get them to align with our values? How do we make sure they're actually helpful, honest, and, well, harmless? That's the huge challenge we're going to unpack today.
You see, the first layer of control isn't really about cracking open the AI's brain and rewiring it. It's about learning how to talk to it. Seriously, think of it like a modern-day genie. The way you phrase your wish changes everything. And that brings us into the world of prompt engineering. Prompt engineering is basically our main tool for steering these powerful models. We're not actually changing the AI's source code, we're just getting much, much smarter about the conversations we have with it. By designing our instructions really strategically, we can guide the AI to do some incredibly complex things.
And that conversation with AI has evolved a lot. At first, we started with what's called zero-shot prompting. You just give the AI a task, cold. But we figured out pretty fast that if you give it a few examples to get it started, that's few-shot prompting, the performance goes through the roof. It's kind of the difference between just saying, write a poem, and showing it a few haikus first so it gets the vibe.
And that idea led to something even more powerful, a real breakthrough called chain of thought prompting. Instead of just asking for the final answer, we teach the AI to show its work. We give it an example where we reason through a problem step by step, and then the model learns to do the same. This just dramatically cuts down on errors in things like logic and math problems. And the innovation has just kept on coming. Now we have incredible techniques like retrieval augmented generation, or RAG, which basically gives the AI access to external knowledge to fight misinformation. There's emotion prompting to help it get the tone just right, and even chain of code that uses programming logic to solve really tough reasoning tasks. The big picture here is that prompt engineering has become this amazing toolkit for super fine-grained control. But okay, having this level of control over the process immediately brings up a way bigger question. What happens when we need to guide the AI's values? This is where the whole conversation has to shift from just giving simple instructions to creating something much bigger, a moral code. A company called Anthropic has really been a pioneer here with an idea they call constitutional AI. The whole goal is to build a kind of moral compass directly into the model itself. So instead of just telling the AI how to answer, this constitution tells it what it should value when it comes up with an answer. And the principles themselves can be, well, surprisingly direct. This quote right here is a core part of their constitution. You can see it's less of a specific command and more of a guiding philosophy, a fundamental rule the AI is trained to always, always follow. So, how do you actually get an AI to follow that? Well, it's a pretty clever two-step process. First, in a supervised phase, the AI learns how to spot and rewrite harmful responses based on the rules in its constitution. Then, in a reinforcement phase, it starts generating its own answers and ranking them, essentially teaching itself to prefer the answers that best line up with its constitutional principles. And this is a really big shift from how things were done before. The industry standard has been something called reinforcement learning from human feedback, or RLHF, where you have an army of humans constantly rating AI answers. Anthropic's method, RLIF, uses AI to give that feedback instead. The AI critiques itself based on its constitution. Their argument is that this is way faster, easier to scale up, and maybe even a little more objective. But this is where the story gets really interesting. I mean, calling a corporate document a constitution is a pretty bold move, right? And critics have started asking if this is really a meaningful solution, or if it's just a shiny distraction. This quote really hits the nail on the head of the critique. Scholars are basically saying, look, just having a list of principles doesn't come close to capturing the deep democratic meaning of what a real constitution is all about. Ideas like limited power, the rule of law, and basic human rights. And the criticisms are pretty serious. When you minimize human feedback, you risk losing all that messy, nuanced human judgment. Researchers point out that you just can't fully automate a complex value like fairness. And then there's the really tricky part. If an AI makes decisions based on its own constitution, who's actually responsible when something goes wrong? Which all leads to this fundamental question. When a small group of developers at a private company gets to define the ethical rules for an AI that millions of people are going to use, Whose values are they actually programming into it? And who decided they get to make those choices for the rest of us? So, this very potent critique has sparked a completely different vision. What if we took the whole constitution idea seriously, like really seriously? What if we created an AI constitution, not in a company boardroom, but through an actual democratic process? Legal scholars point out that corporate-led AI has two big legitimacy problems. The first is the opacity deficit. It's a black box, so we can't really see why it makes the decisions it does. The second is the political community deficit. The AI's logic comes from statistics, not from the shared values and social context of an actual human community. And to solve these problems, they're proposing this idea of public constitutional AI. The basic framework is that the public, the actual people who are going to be living with this technology, would get involved in drafting a constitution. And that constitution would then be a mandatory part of the training for any big AI model that operates in that region. The core idea here is actually pretty simple. For AI governance to be legitimate, it has to be grounded in what the public actually wants. It's about transforming AI alignment from this private, highly technical problem into a public, social project that we can all build together. And there's even a roadmap for how this could work. First, citizens would draft the principles, maybe through things like public assemblies. Second, you could have AI courts, public bodies that create real-world examples in case law to interpret those principles. And finally, all the big AI models would be required to train on and comply with that public constitution and all its interpretations. So what this really boils down to is a fundamental change in how we even think about AI safety. The goal is to get this conversation out of corporate boardrooms and into the public square, turning AI alignment into a truly democratic process. And that really brings the question back to all of us. This whole debate over who gets to write the rules for AI is one of the most important conversations of our time. So if you had the chance to write the very first article in a global AI constitution, what would it be? What's the one single principle you think every AI should have to follow?